Welcome to Golden Mastermind Seminars Radio with your host, Jeffrey Combs.
Good afternoon, Jeffrey Combs, the Golden Mastermind Podcast. Good to be here with you. Golden Mastermind Seminars Podcast, GMS. This originally was the More Heart Than Talent Mindset call that back in the day on Tuesday nights virtually had hundreds, sometimes up into the thousands of listeners, as it originally was a live conference call. So good to be here with you. It was a 10:30 call back in the day. It is now 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 o'clock Eastern for the GMS podcast. A very unique concept, reality today. It's called signal to noise ratio. It's the 80-20 rule, and it's the way that it's how you produce. And so this is based on owning a business, and if you're a business owner and you're full-time in a business, there's full-time, spare time, part-time. But if you're a full-time producer and living your life, it's based on an 18-hour day. It's a signal-to-noise ratio. It was originally pioneered by Steve Jobs, and it's what he expected of his employees, and what he expected of his think tank, and what he also expected of himself. And the signal-to-noise meaning that many people get overwhelmed in the noise of life. They get overwhelmed in chaos, drama, they get overwhelmed in trauma, they get overwhelmed in other situations that keep them perpetuating the same situation over and over, for feeling the same set of feelings. And the signal is the energy that you're constantly in constant movement, in constant production, in constant flow. And you want to be in a flow, so it's a flow to anxiety ratio. So you want to be in a high level of flow, a high level of production, a high level of high consciousness, and only a small percent of your time do you find yourself relapsing, being overwhelmed, procrastinating, and avoiding, where most of your time is devoted to production, and then the other areas of your life to love, joy, bliss, and other obligations and duties. And you're able to do this easily and effortlessly throughout a day, over and over, and it doesn't feel mundane or it doesn't feel boring, and you actually become inspired by the way you are living. Jared, good to see you this afternoon. I must hand it to you. Your branding is really top tier. And Sarah, thank you for being here. On Tuesday, More Heart Than Talent Mindset, that was originally what it was called, and now it's called the Golden Mastermind Podcast. And the topic for today is the signal to noise ratio, or the 80-20 rule. And the more that you understand this situation, so that means that when you wake up, this is all part of your signal. You wake up and you're in the flow of it. Good afternoon, Josh. Good to see you. So when you wake up in the morning, the people who are really disciplined, they're already in their day. And that's part of the 18-hour day. And people who are disciplined, they wake up and they cold plunge. They have a routine. That's what I have. And so most of society does not have a routine, and they just wing their whole day. But a person who is a highly evolved, highly conscious person who is in the flow of life has a day-to-day routine that most of the planet does not. And this is why most of the people that live this way are criticized by the law of the many, while you are the law of the few. So there are a few people, they wake up and they exercise early, and they have the same time they exercise. They pray, they write content. And by the time 8 o'clock rolls around, they've already been productive for at least 3 hours of their day. When most of society is still rubbing the sleep out of their eyes, they haven't prayed, they haven't read any content, they're not in any flow, and so they're in a chronic state of being behind, trying to catch up. A skilled producer, a skilled manifester, a person who lives in high consciousness doesn't deem this boring. They deem it as the ritual of being their best self. And in that ritual of being the best self, it just becomes automatic. And so waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning is not difficult. I coach a group of men a group of men and women led by highly disciplined leaders, and they routinely are all up at 4 o'clock in the morning, like me. Now, that doesn't mean you should do this, but this is what many people do. And one of the areas that we borrow time is from rest. We're able to rest in a different brainwave than most of society, in a very relaxed body. And many people criticize this. They will say, you don't sleep enough. And we don't have to go into a long explanation, because we know how to rest in a brainwave state that's conducive to being highly effective. And when you live this way, it just becomes a routine of production, living, joy, bliss, and there's a flow to it. And if you're flowing in it, then you'll attract other people, other law of the few, who will be able to master some of the same skills that you master. And when you have 4 or 5 of these people in a culture, those 4 or 5 can attract thousands. And so the law of the few is what attracts the law of the many. I coach multiple men and women who, in direct sales companies, insurance companies, real estate businesses, they will rank advance, and in that rank, they're rank advancing because they have other people in their team that are creating a compounding effect. So I coach a woman who she just opened one of her checks for $122,000 a month. Well, it's a byproduct of the 7 women that she mentors in her team that have been with her for a number of years, who have created the ability for her to rank advance. As they're rank advancing, it creates a compounded effect. And this is called the signal to noise ratio. That she will have 10,000 people in her genealogy, but those 10,000 really break down to 7 people or 5 people. And this is the law of the few. So the signal to noise ratio, that means most of your day you're dialed in. And so you're listening to very little noise. The signal is you're in high consciousness. That's the signal. And you're listening to the universe as it downloads to you. And you're receiving the content. You're receiving the availability. Ideas come to you. And you're able to create an effortless flow. And you're not living in doubt. It's impossible to succeed when a large percent of your consciousness is consumed with doubt, which is where a large percent of the world lives. They're in an overwhelmed state of doubt, seldom ever accessing higher consciousness, because they spend most of their time getting ready to get ready, spend most of their time in gossip, trauma, drama, overwhelmed state, and they're not focused. And until you're focused, you're unfocused. And when you're focused, life begins to change. Because when you're focused, magic happens. Just like yesterday, I asked my assistant to send out an email presentation. He sent out an email response to the database for coaching clients. Well, a woman saw it that had not seen it before. She sent me a message, and within a few minutes, I was on a call with her, and then later that evening, she hired me. And that's the signal. That's the signal to noise ratio. I mean, the law of averages of that happening is very slim, but I asked him to send this message out before he went home, and it manifested into a new client who definitely is seeking my services in the synchronicity between the client and me. When she went to send me a message in Messenger, she found a message in there in 2015 that I had sent her, and she didn't respond to. I mean, this is all signal to noise, and this is all synchro destiny. And this is how it begins to operate, because there's a level of expectation in the signal to noise ratio. And as you have a better understanding of that, means that the signal you send out, the energy that you're oscillating at, the emotional state that you live in, you have a very high signal to noise ratio. You're in a much higher vibration than most of the planet. This comes from repetition, experience, meditation, yoga, healing arts, and being homeopathic, naturopathic, and being in a state of flow, so that people begin to find you. And when this happens, it feels magical, because you start to understand that this is who I am and what I'm capable of. And then on any given day, any given moment, people can begin to show up because of the way that you are beginning to live. And so the most challenging aspect of it is in the beginning. Most people are not patient enough, and they quit before they ever arrive. And I completely understand, because we tend to run out of money, we run out of resources, we run out of, most importantly, hope, and we run out of belief. This is why it's important that you focus on the repetition and experience. You definitely have to create results, but you can't be attached to the result. That's why you focus on the conversations, you focus on the discipline, you focus on the skill set, and eventually the results will happen. But you can't continue to look at the water waiting for it to boil. You have to keep moving. You have to keep the moving parts moving. You have to stay in the flow of it. And that's what the signal is. Your signal comes from love, joy, bliss. And then enlightenment. Your signal comes from understanding, knowing, being aware, trust, truth, and you live in that energy. And so you're constantly oscillating, transmuting, sending messages telepathically that I'm open for business, I'm available, I'm looking for a vendor, a contractor, I'm looking for a person of influence and affluence, someone to show up today, today. You're looking for it today, and if it doesn't happen today, you live on delayed gratification because it's going to come at some point, because your signal to noise ratio begins to change. And you'll see this in your teammates and other people in your circle of influence that you're mentoring or coaching or leading. You'll see that many people will drop to the wayside. They will quit before they ever arrive. They'll find a flaw in the system. They'll find some breakdown. They'll find a flaw in you, and then they'll either blame you or they'll blame someone else or blame some situation, and you let these people go easily and effortlessly, because what you're doing is you're creating the vacuum law of prosperity. You're creating the opening, the allow space, because what you're always looking for is this, the 80-20 principle. You're looking for this right here, the 20%. The 20% breaks down to the law of the few. And if you read any of David Hawkins' content and the way that he breaks down consciousness, just like the 80-20 rule, Hawkins in many of his books writes that when consciousness was discovered and really began to be understood and written about in the 1990s, beginning with the book Power versus Force, and then understanding muscle testing, how the body doesn't lie, and then truth versus falsehood, and understanding this in the calibrated energy of the world, 78% of the world lives in lower consciousness. Now, those of you on today's Facebook Live, Wayne Clark, Alexis, Jared, and Josh, and Sarah all live in higher consciousness. So you would represent the 22% of society that accesses a higher level of consciousness. Then when you take that 20% of 22, you continue to break down the law of the few. So if you take 22% and then take the next 20%, what you start to break down is where you are in today's world. You're the law of the few. You're in a very small percent of the population, 1% of the population that actually accesses the courage to cross the bridge to the next level of higher consciousness. Higher consciousness means you understand more, you're aware more, and it means you process little to none. You understand what's going on, and you're able to navigate and operate easily and effortlessly, while most of the world is processing, analyzing, thinking, validating, justifying, and explaining themselves rather than being and staying in a relaxed body. The state of consciousness that you seek to be in is a B state. And the B state is you're being your best self. And then the do is be precedes do, and it's be, do, and then receive. And you've heard the term be, do, have. Well, that's what it really means. It means be your best self. Do the actions that will bring you the results. Do the repetition and experience over and over so that you become skilled at the craft. You become skilled at the skill. And then you'll begin to receive the law of compensation through the laws of the universe. And in attraction, you'll attract your reality, people, and situations to fulfill your feelings. That's the value of letting go, because if you're not letting go, you'll continue to attract the same broken relationships, the same codependent relationships, the same teammates who disappoint you, the vendors who don't follow through and do what they say they're going to say. As you become more and more skilled at understanding the laws of the universe and understanding that reap and sow, law of attraction, law of compensation, as you have a better understanding of how to navigate and operate in the most challenging times in world history. And there's still plenty of money, there's plenty of opportunities, but there's also a lot of trauma-based mind control that you learn to navigate. The food choices that Americans consume are without a doubt some of the worst. That's your responsibility to fuel your body with higher octane, higher protein, better choices, more meditation, more detoxing, cleansing, celery juicing, any multitude of situations that can assist you to release heavy metals and parasites. Heavy metals and parasites have been a way of life for the last 100 years. And this explains much of the phenomenon that happens in the medical industry. Now, understanding the whole medical industry and the Rockefeller cabal that stripped the medical colleges of homeopathic and naturopathic remedies is a whole nother chapter down the rabbit hole that I suggest you figure out. And then as you keep going deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole, there's Operation Paperclip, Operation Mockingbird, and then in the 70s and 80s, the new wonder drug, Ritalin, is released to the world and American populace. ADD, ADHD, PTSD, all these situations begin to manifest. And the whole world of medicine and pharmaceutical situations become a byproduct of this situation that you see so many people live in brain fog. They live in overwhelmed states of unconscious consciousness. They look like just walking zombies. And this is why you'll see people wearing masks in their car and wearing masks walking down the street, because of how they've been trauma-based mind controlled. And the more you understand that you are not the law of the many, you are the law of the few, and you're operating a different universal law than the rest of society, and you have a higher signal-to-noise ratio than most of the planet. And you're able to operate on an 18-hour day, where 18 hours of your day is devoted to your craft, your love, what inspires you, and you're able to do this very, very effectively. And most of the people are not in alignment with this because they're so overwhelmed. They don't have focus. They don't have a business. They continue to live in liability debt. They're overwhelmed. They're unorganized, undisciplined. They can't get their car in their garage. They have challenges making payments. They pay interest on money that doesn't exist. They continue to live in that TikTok world that continues to chew them up in the time clock of life. And then eventually they run out of time living the greatest pain, the pain of regret. And if you're young and you're just getting started, or wherever you are in your life, you want to continue to live in high consciousness, because what it does is it continues to improve who and what you attract, so that people begin to show up organically, holistically. And then if you're doing any lead generation on your own, you'll attract also quality people and leads that you attract through sales funnels and other means of advertising, or through networking, or through 3-foot rule, or any multitude of situations. That in the signal-to-noise ratio, your ratio becomes so high that synchrodestiny and synchronistically, people begin to show up in ways that most people never experience. And then you begin to say to yourself, this always happens to me. And this is how you start, this is how the people begin to show up. It's what you let go of creates the vacuum law of prosperity. What you hold on to, when you hold on to struggle, when you hold on to anxiety, fear, and doubt, when you have to be right, when you hold on to money, when you continue to struggle with money and other means and situations, you will continue to recreate the same situation over and over to fulfill the same set of feelings. And in relationships, intimate relationships, you keep attracting the same trauma bonds and the same people who will violate you to fulfill your feelings. When you have a better understanding of this, the same will show up in your teammates. When you keep attracting the same situation to fulfill the same feelings, that's called the payoff. As you have a better understanding of what the payoff means, it means that attract the same situation to fulfill the neurochemical craving that has you addicted to disappointment. And see, most of society goes, well, that's stupid, that's dumb, why would I do that? You would do it to fulfill the payoff. The payoff allows you to avoid being your best self. The payoff allows you to avoid your own success. The payoff allows you, most importantly, to avoid being responsible, which is the number one reason that people have challenges being sober, because they're not sure if they can go the next day without a dessert. They're not certain if a week down the road they can't have a drink. And then they romance what they might be losing. So their signal-to-noise ratio, they have a high noise ratio and a low signal ratio. When you have a high signal ratio, it means the oscillation, transmutation, energy that you are transmuting is very high, and people begin to feel it. It creates a law of magnetism. And you'll have a much higher ratio of money flowing to you, people coming to you. You'll experience your first $100,000 months. You'll have opportunities come to you that most of society do not experience. You'll go into restaurants and the table will be available for you. Box seats at concerts and other situations. They begin to avail themselves to you because your signal-to-noise ratio, you're stepping above most of society. You're stepping into the 1%. And when you're in that 1% of higher consciousness, this is where you begin to attract the highest level of people to your reality. This is where you begin to receive the most amount of content comes to you. This is when you begin to live in a state of KNOW, you know. And in a know state, you never have to explain yourself. When someone tries to provoke you into explaining, you walk away because it's not worth your time. You're able to easily and effortlessly let people go in a relaxed body rather than continue to hold on to the same set of circumstances, same set of feelings. Now, Aaron just said many people spout noise when they talk, few speak very clearly. That's correct. Now, those of you who have coached with me for years, you have watched me point out to you many, many times, kinda and guess. I've been doing this for years, and in a relatively short period of time, with a client who is willing, they will begin to let go of the sound kinda and the word guess. And what those two sounds and words represent in communication style is lack of clarity. Because that's kind of means nothing. I'm kind of hungry. I'm hungry. I mean, kind of has no merit, but it's a sound used to minimize the impact or to minimize the situation. And it's also a minimal word of non-commitment. The word guess that most Americans and Canadians insert into their sentence telegraph doubt, I guess. So when you're guessing, it means you're not certain. When you're certain, it changes the signal to noise ratio. It elevates your consciousness. And when you begin to let go of the trauma that you've experienced, what you're doing is the calcified pineal gland begins to open. And as your pineal gland is either opening or it's already open, that's the ocular gland of God, also called third eye. And as that begins to open, you'll process less, think less. You'll spend less time in your analytical egoic brain, and you'll download the content that comes to you that you know. You won't feel a chip on your shoulder. You don't feel a desire to have to be right. You won't be in conflict with people. You won't feel resentful. You won't feel like you're getting taken advantage of. And you won't, most importantly, you won't be a victim. In a high signal to low noise ratio, you will seldom ever be a victim because you don't have time for it. You wouldn't waste your time. This is why when you evolve, you don't waste your time in conflict, in traffic. When someone cuts you off, you just let it go. You don't have to be right. And in a high signal to noise ratio, you spend very little time arguing with anyone because you've given up the will to be right because you don't care about it anymore. The pleasure isn't worth the pain. You devote your energy to empowering others. You're devoting your energy to 12-step meetings and being a sponsor. You devote your energy to being a mentor. You devote your energy to being a leader. You devote your energy to holistic naturopathic remedies to heal yourself. You don't waste your time arguing with someone because it doesn't make you any money. Not only does it make you any money, it completely hinders your ability to attract quality, like-minded people because the ego that has to be right will attract the people to be in conflict with. So whether it's in business or intimate relationships, you'll continue to attract the same people over and over to fulfill the same feelings. That is what's called the payoff. And as you begin to grasp just how much of a waste of time that this is, you'll spend your time in inspiration rather than desperation. You'll spend your time in higher consciousness. You'll spend your time in joy, bliss, and enlightenment. You'll spend your time in intimate relationships with people you can be intimate with, rather than spend your time with people who will violate you, reject you, abandon you, so you can fulfill the feelings of not being good enough. As you begin to deeply understand the process of letting go, you are virtually separating yourself. So the separation is the mind-body connection. Then the body seldom is in dis-ease. This is why I never get sick, like never, like N-E-V-E-R. I've never missed a day of coaching. And I did have that one virus that went around 5 years ago, but it didn't debilitate me. My hair fell out, but it grew out relatively quickly. I experienced what it was like to feel that virus, but it didn't first of all, I didn't buy into it. If I were bought into it, then I would be doing what the people bought into it. And since I don't believe in that, I was able to heal much quicker. It's the healing codes of the biological apocalypse when you begin to live your life like this. And then there's different remedies you can teach yourself. There's detoxing, cleansing, heavy metal detoxing. There's parasite detoxing. You become so much more evolved at who you are and what you're creating that you're no longer the mind-body connection to the events that shape the feelings. For those of you here this afternoon, thank you very much for being on the Golden Mastermind Podcast. Have a great afternoon. If you are watching and have not accessed my free 20-minute coaching call, I'd be honored to speak to you. If you're a former client, I did put out a post yesterday. I'm offering a 2-year, 48-hour coaching program. If you'd like to receive that, if you'd like to find out more about that, I would be honored to speak to you. That is for a former client. I'm offering a 2-year, 48-hour coaching program. If you'd like to find out more, send me a message. Breathe, release, and let go in a relaxed body.